YouTube. I'm live on YouTube, but let's see, Facebook. Okay, now it's working. Okay, good to see everybody. All right, everything seems to be working. So let me just close the number of programs here because we got too many programs open. And all right. I think I just about everything closed. Okay. All right, it's good to see everybody. And as we've been doing the last few days because of the situation in Ukraine, we're asking everybody to pray for the devotees and everybody there in Ukraine so the situation can be normalized and that people aren't being killed and killing each other. And so in order to pray for the devotees and the people in general in Ukraine and also in Russia, we're not taking sides because this could be dangerous for the devotees in Russia if we take sides. So remember that. So, but we're praying for everybody that conflicts can be resolved in the Vaishnava fashion. As Prabhupada mentioned, referring to 529 in the Gita, Bhaktaram Jagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheswaram Abhutanam Dharma Shakwapas. Bhaktaram Jagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheswaram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gatwamam Shantim Richati, that one can attain real peace when one understands that Krishna is the enjoyer, Krishna is the proprietor, and he's the well-wisher of all living entities. So that's our actual peace formula. And so naturally people will have different opinions or different perspectives on things. And we respect that. And we ask everyone to resolve their conflicts in a Krishna conscious way, if that's possible. Anyway, this is the nature of the world. So now we're going to chant the prayers of Lord Nrsingadev for the devotees in Ukraine and the devotees in Russia, and the people in Ukraine and the people in Russia and the people all over the world, because we do want peace, and we want peace so that we can bring people to Krishna consciousness. Shringhaya Ladata Dayane Hiranyakashi Urvatsaka Silataka Kalaye Ituna Singa Paratuna Singo Yato Yami Tuna Singa Mahina Stringo Idayena Stringo Shringhamadim Shadanam Prapajoy Nashringhamadim Shadanam Prapajoy Shringhamadim Shadanam Prapajoy Tavakara Kamalapa Kam Uttasringam Ganita Hiranyakasipu Tanu Ringam Isamadrita Adavani Rupa Jaitakari Sadai Jaitakari Sadai come and love and pray to come and put the string on. Dalita, Hiranya Kasipu, Dano bring home. Esavadrita, Nanahari Rupa, Kadesa, Ate, Gaida Kadesa, Gaida Kadesa, Navakana come and love and pray to come with the singer. Nadita, Hiranya Kasipu, Dano, Ringa, Esavadrita, Nanahari Rupa, Gaida Kadesa, Gaida Kadesa, Gaida Kadesa, Gaida String Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paramacharya, also tell us that Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapanath Sai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturanam Ki Jai Jagadata Sami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschattate Shutarni. So again we asked the devotees to pray for everyone in Ukraine and in Russia and pray that this conflict, or at least this aspect of the conflict, will be over very, very quickly, so that fewer people are harmed and the devotees can go on with their Krishna consciousness unimpeded. So, now we're going to the Caitanya Caritamrta. Om Gana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur and Meditam Yena Tasmai Shikarave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, let's go. And we're on the 24th chapter of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta Madhya, of course, and we're starting with text 273, and this is the story of Mugrari, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. So we're in the middle of the story about Magrari the hunter. Magrari the hunter was the hunter who half killed animals. Narada Muni confronted him with his karma, and Magrari agreed to be a devotee. And he and his wife sat down on the banks of the river in front of a tulsi tree, tulsi plant, and they chanted the holy names of the Lord, and they became so purified that even Magrari, when he went to see his Guru Maharaj, would not step on an ant, and he was skipping around so he wouldn't step on an ant, and he also brushing the ants out of the way. So that's where we are in this particular story. This is the whole chapter is about the different interpretations of the Atmarama verse. So Magrari obviously is one of the types of Atmaramas, Nigrantha. Anyway, if you were listening before, you would understand what I was saying. So let's continue. Etena yadbhuta vyada tavahim sadayo gunaha ribhakta bravitaye nateshu paratapanaha. O hunter, good qualities like nonviolence which you have developed are not very astonishing, for those engaged in the Lord's devotional service are never inclined to give pain to others because of envy. It's an interesting point. I just want to mention one discussion we're having on the GBC conference right now. I brought it up. There are some farm communities which shall remain nameless to protect the innocent or guilty, as the case may be, that are being attacked by wild boars. A wild boar is a big wild pig with tusks. It's not a boring person. So this farm community for many years has been, how do I say it, shooting the wild boars to keep them out because they're destroying the vegetation. They go under the fences and do everything. So we're having this discussion right now on the GBC conference, which I brought up, as to whether these boars can be killed because there's no other method of getting rid of them. And so the questions or the discussions going back and forth, and haven't gotten a clear answer yet from anybody as to what can be done. Of course, we're protecting Krishna's agriculture, the deity's agriculture, otherwise the agriculture basically wouldn't exist. So sometimes there's extenuating circumstances. But the point is that sometimes we have to give pain to others, not because of envy, but because of the service of Krishna. I like, even if we harvest vegetables, it's giving pain to the poor little carrot. I mean, just like the other day, I was at another farm community and I was cooking carrots for dinner. Yes, I do my own cooking. And I put the carrot into the nuclear machine. That's a microwave, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And obviously I killed it. But it wasn't because of envy, it was because of offering to Krishna. So when we start the car, when we walk on grass, when we breathe, we are harming so many living entities. But as long as we're engaged in Krishna's service, aham tvam sarvapapayibhyo mokshayashami masuchaha. So anyway, so the previous verse was a quotation from the Skanda Purana. Tava se vyada donhare anganeya nila kushasarani donhare bhakje vasaila. The hunter then received the two great sages in the courtyard of his house. He spread out a straw mat for them to sit upon, and with great devotion he begged them to sit down. Jalakani bhakje donhara pada prakshalila se jalastri purushe piya shirela hila. He then fetched water and washed the sage's feet with great devotion, and both husband and wife drank that water and sprinkled it on their heads. Wow. This is the process one should follow when receiving the spiritual master as someone on the level of the spiritual master. When the spiritual master comes to the residence of his disciples, the disciples should follow in the footsteps of the former hunter. It doesn't matter what one was before initiation. After initiation, one must learn the etiquette mentioned herein. Wow. I guess I have to allow people to do that. Oh my God. Anyway, this is part of my service. Kampa Pulakashru Haila Krishna Namagana Urvabahu Nrityakare Vastrahudana. When the hunter chanted the Hare Krishna mantra before his spiritual master, his body trembled and tears welled up in his eyes. Filled with ecstatic love, he raised his hands and began to dance, waving his garments up and down. Dekyavya dhere prema parvata mahamuni naradere kahi tumi hauspashamhani. When Parvata Muni saw the ecstatic loving symptoms of the hunter, he told Narada, certainly you are a touchstone. When a touchstone touches iron, it turns the iron to gold. Parvata Muni called Narada Muni a touchstone because by his touch the hunter, who was the lowest among men, became an elevated and perfect Vaishnava. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that the position of a Vaishnava can be tested by seeing how good a touchstone he is. That is, by seeing how many Vaishnavas he has made during his life. A Vaishnava should be a touchstone so that he can convert others to Vaishnavism by his preaching, even though people may be fallen like the hunter. There are many so-called advanced devotees who sit in a secluded place for their personal benefit. They do not go out to preach and convert others into Vaishnavas, and therefore they certainly cannot be called Sparshamani. That means a touchstone. Advanced devotees. Kanishta Adhikari devotees cannot turn others into Vaishnavas, but a Majjhima Adhikari Vaishnava can do so by preaching. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised his followers to increase the numbers of Vaishnavas. Yadideka Tarika Krishna Padesha Maragaya Gurupoyi Puradesh. That's from the CC 7-128. It is Madhya Lila. It is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's wish that everyone should become a Vaishnava and Guru. Following the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his disciplic succession, one can become a spiritual master, for the process is very easy. One can go everywhere and anywhere to preach the instructions of Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's instruction. Therefore, the duty of every Vaishnava is to travel and preach the Bhagavad Gita either in his country or a foreign country. This is the test of Sparshamani, following in the footsteps of Narada Muni. It's an interesting story. Of course, Prabhupada is definitely a Sparshamani. I mean, if you look at what Prabhupada accomplished with people who were lower than Magrari, I mean, really low, not even just meat eaters or hunters. He had people who were taking intoxication, illicit sex, doing all the 4 prohibited activities, and basically crazy. And Prabhupada turned an army of those sorts of people into Vaishnavas. That's what a Sparshamani is. It's really interesting. So then, here's a story. Once upon a time, devotees were having a kirtan, some program, and Prabhupada said the Narada Muni was there. And this is very similar to what Parvata Muni had observed with Narada Muni's preaching. And the devotees asked Prabhupada, what was Narada Muni doing? And Prabhupada said Narada Muni was laughing to see all the Malechas and Yavanas dancing and chanting. So laughing not at us, but laughing with ecstasy to see Srila Prabhupada's exalted position. No one has done such a thing in the past, other than Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. But in the past, amongst Vaishnavas, no one has gone into the Malecha countries and wholesale converted people, and they became gurus. Wow. I mean, look at Prabhupada's exalted position. Narada Muni converted, he converts many Muguraris, obviously. But Prabhupada converted many dogs. Ooh. And brought them to Krishna consciousness. Amazing. Aho danyosi devarshe kripaya yasya takshanat nichopyut pulako leve lubdako ratimachute. Parvata Muni continued, my dear friend Narada Muni, you are as glorified as the sage amongst the demigods. You are glorified as the sage among the demigods, or amongst the demigods. By your mercy, even a low-born person like this hunter can immediately become attached to Lord Krishna. A pure Vaishnava believes in the statements of the Shastras. This verse is quoted from the Vedic literature, the Skanda Purana. Narda kahi Vaishnava tamara anakichu aya vyadakahi yari patao se diya. Narada Muni then asked the hunter, my dear Vaishnava, do you have some income for your maintenance? The hunter replied, my dear spiritual master, whoever you send gives me something when he comes to see me. Prabhupada explains this confirms the statement in the Bhagavad Gita 9:22 to the effect that the Lord carries all the necessities to his Vaishnava devotee. Ananyaschinto yontomam yejanak parivasate tesham nityabhyuttamang yogakshevahamyam. For those who are dedicated to me, I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. Narada Muni asked the former hunter how he is being maintained, and he replied that everyone who came to see him brought him something for his maintenance. Krishna, who is situated in everyone's heart, says, I personally carry all necessities to a Vaishnava. He can order anyone to execute this. Everyone is ready to give something to a Vaishnava, and if a Vaishnava is completely engaged in devotional service, he need not be anxious for his maintenance. Wow. And that reminds me of a story with Lord Chaitanya and Srivas Thakur. Srivas Thakur was Narada Muni. Anyway, so Lord Chaitanya asked Srivas Thakur, who had a family, a large family. Probably it's the only appearance of Narada Muni in which he was married with a family. So Srivas Thakur had a very large family, and Lord Chaitanya said, how do you maintain such a large family? And Srivas Thakur said, hey, Lord Chaitanya, I have this 1, 2, 3 technique. And Lord Chaitanya said, what is that 1, 2, 3 technique? And Srivas Thakur said, if I don't eat for 3 days, I will tie a brick to my legs and drown myself in the Ganges. And then Lord Chaitanya said, even if the goddess of fortune has to go begging, you will never be without your necessities. So that's the point. If one is really dedicated, of course you should work too. It's not that you say, I'm really dedicated, Krishna will take care of me. But part of Krishna taking care of you is Krishna gives you the means to take care of yourself. It's like the story I often tell about the man who had so much faith that God was going to take care of him. And there was a flood, and the government sent a boat, and he refused to accept the boat. He was in his house because he expected God to come. And then, after that, he was on the roof, and God sent a helicopter with a rope. He refused to accept that because he wanted God to personally save him. And then after that, he drowned. He went to God and he said, why didn't you save me? And God said, you fool, rascal, idiot. Don't you understand? Didn't you see the boat and helicopter I sent? So God helps those who help themselves. There's 5 factors of action according to the Bhagavad Gita, and you control most of them, except for one. You don't control the super soul. So man proposes, God disposes, but part of that proposal is you gotta do something, buddy, not just sit on your trasero. And I'm not going to translate what trasero means. Eteyana napatao kichukarya nai Sabe dvi janara yogya bhakshamatra chai. The former hunter said, "Please do not send so much grain. Only send what is sufficient for 2 people, no more." So the former hunter only wanted enough for 2 people to eat, no more. It is not necessary for Vaishnava to keep a stock of food for the next day. He should receive only sufficient grain to last 1 day. The next day he must again depend on the Lord's mercy. This is the instruction of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. When his personal servant Govinda sometimes kept a stock of haritaki, Myro Balan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised him, saying, "Why did you keep a stock for the next day?" Srila Rupa Goswami and others were begging daily from door to door for their sustenance, and they never attempted to stock their ashram with food for the next day. We should not materially calculate, thinking it is better to stock food for a week. Why give the Lord trouble by having him bring food daily? One should be convinced that the Lord will provide daily. There is no need to stock food for the next day. Now, I think I need to explain this, because we were just hearing some news about the devotees in Ukraine who were expecting this to happen, the war, and they stocked food for months on their farms. So did they disobey this instruction? No. One has to apply different injunctions according to time, place, and circumstance. If you're running a temple, you have to keep a stock of food. Prabhupada even said that when you buy bhoga, Bhoga, which means unoffered food, enjoyment, then you should buy wholesale. So wholesale means, what does wholesale mean? Wholesale means you buy a whole bunch at once, maybe a month or 2 or even a year's worth. So this particular instruction is for a sannyasi who's doing Madhukari or Paramahamsa, but not for someone who is running an institution. So there's different instructions. One has to have the intelligence how to apply this. Obviously, the hunter, he wasn't running an institution. It was just him and his wife. So if one's engaged in the preaching mission, it's absolutely required to stock food. So this is an example. Yes, you still have to do the Bhoga run. Gopal just asked me a question. Otherwise, if we didn't stock food, you would have to do the Bhoga run every day, early in the morning, so we'd have enough to cook for breakfast. And I think your little self would get tired out after a while by doing that. So we do have to stock food, and because we're doing a preaching mission, utility is the principle, books are the basis, purity is the force. Very, very important. Preaching is the essence. So that's why. But if I was just a traditional sannyasi, just going door to door doing madhukari. Madhukari means you go to different houses and you say, "Please, do you have 1 slice of pizza?" Not more than 1 slice. Next house, another slice of pizza, or a chapati, or what you call roti. That's madhukari. It's not that I would go to a house and say, "Do you have a slice of, do you have roti, another roti," and then stock up like 1,000 rotis. So one also has to be practical, especially if one's engaged in family life, etc., like that. But the situation with, and also, in America, nobody's going to send food to you. And we want to distribute prasadam too in America, and also I make an arrangement so that the devotees in Hungary can distribute food to the refugees, prasadam to the refugees. So, one has to be careful not to take things out of context. That's called hermeneutics, when you can understand how to apply a particular instruction. Otherwise, people would go crazy just keeping stock 1 day and having to do complete shopping the next day. But if you're a traditional sannyasi doing madhukari, go for it. So that's the context of that instruction. Or if you're like McGrary, who's living on the banks of the river, depending on charity, go for it. And it teaches you to depend on Krishna. It's harder to depend on Krishna when you're dealing with money and stocking food and everything. I admit it. But it's the austerity that we have to undergo in order to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. Nardakahi acheraha tumi bhagyavan etabali dvijanaha ila antardan. Narada Muni approved of his not wanting more than a daily supply of food, and he blessed him, saying, "You are fortunate." Narada Muni and Parvata Muni then disappeared from that place. What a wonderful story. Eta kahilan tomayat vyadera kyana yashuni lehaya sadhu sangha prabhavagyana. Thus I have narrated the incident of the hunter. By hearing this narration, one can understand the influence of association with devotees. So that's the point. We just simply have to give people association. We have to be pure enough so our association acts like a touchstone, sparshamani, and basically it'll act. We have to have faith in that. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to stress that even a hunter, the lowest of men, could become a topmost Vaishnava simply by associating with Narada Muni or a devotee in his bona fide disciplic succession, and that can be us too. And, I've experienced that by reaching out to people who are basically, I don't want to criticize, basically challenged. Okay, here's a politically correct way of saying it. They're challenged, the human challenged. That's actually a good way, rather than saying that people were animals. Then giving them association, they actually change. Dinahini yata chilo harinamu dirilo. Eyaratinarta ganavnate poila eduiarta mili chabisharta ana haila. In this way, we have found 3 more meanings of the Atmarama verse. Combine these with the other meanings, and the total number of meanings adds up to 26 in all. We haven't got to the end yet. Ararta shuna yaha artera bandara stule dviarta shukshme vatrisha prakara. There's yet another meaning which is full of a variety of imports. Actually, there are 2 gross meanings and 32 subtle meanings. Oh my God. The 2 gross meanings refer to regulative devotional service and spontaneous devotional service. There are also 32 subtle meanings under the heading of regulative devotional service. There are 16 meanings based on the understanding of the word Atmarama to mean 1. A servant of the Lord as his personal associate. 2. A personal friend. 3. Personal parents or similar superiors. 4. Personal beloved. 5. A servant elevated by spiritual cultivation. 6. A friend by spiritual cultivation. 7. Parents and superior devotees by cultivation of devotional service. 8. A beloved wife or female friend by cultivation of devotional service. 9. A mature devotee as a servant. And 10. A mature devotee as a friend. 11. A mature devotee as a parent or superior. 12. A mature devotee as a wife or beloved. 13. An immature devotee as a servant. 14. An immature devotee as a friend. 15. An immature devotee as a father or superior. And 16. An immature devotee as a beloved. Similarly, under the heading of spontaneous devotion, there are also 16 various associates. Therefore, the total number of devotees under the headings of regulated devotees and spontaneous devotees is 32. Wow. Oh my God. A lot of Atmaramas there. Atma Shabde Kahe Sarva Vida Bhagavan Eka Swayam Bhagavan Hara Bhagavan Akyana. The word Atma refers to all the different personalities of Godhead. One of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, and the others are different incarnations or expansions of Krishna. Prabhupada explains the word Atma also includes all kinds of personalities known as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means that Krishna has unlimited expansions. This is described in the Brahma Samhita. 546. Departure yeva shantaramabhupecha Dipayate ravitaketu samana dharma Yastadrageva hichak vishnu tayavibhati Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The expansions of Krishna are thus compared to candles that have been lit from an original candle. All the secondary candles are equally powerful, but the original candle is that from which all the others have been lit. Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is expanded as Balaram, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Vasudeva. In this way, there are innumerable incarnations and expansions who are also called Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Regarding the variety of personalities known as Bhagavan, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura says that the personality of Godhead known as Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that his expansions are also called the Personality of Godhead. In other words, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the origin of all other personalities of Godhead. Hear the difference? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the other personalities, which are the same as Krishna, as we mentioned many times, are called personalities of Godhead. Speculative philosophers and mystic yogis also meditate upon the form of Krishna, but this form is not the form of the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a Bhagavan is but a partial representation of the Lord's full potency. Remember, Prabhupada says supreme, but he's the personality of Godhead. Nonetheless, he also has to be understood to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should simply understand that Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj and Vrindavan, the friend of the coward boys and lover of the gopis, is actually the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's attained by spontaneous love. Although his expansions are also called the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they're attained only by the execution of regulative devotional service. So this is another important thing Prabhupada is slipping in here. That by regulative devotional service, that means following the rules and regulations very, very strictly, one attains an expansion of Krishna. So, how do you attain Krishna? By following the rules and regulations very, very strictly, and cultivating internally raganuga bhakti, that means spontaneous devotional service, following the footsteps of a particular resident, ragatmika devotee. That's the difference. In both cases, both devotees, that is, the devotee who is doing regular devotional service and the devotee who is doing raganuga or even higher, both cases, they both follow the rules and regulations very strictly. Those who are actually on a higher platform follow the rules and regulations very strictly, well, officially for two reasons. Or maybe there's more than two, but two that I can think of. One reason is they want to set an example for the rest of you rascals. Because yad yad charity shrestас tatat eveto junaha. As an advanced person acts, or as someone who's an exemplar acts, other people follow. You give people an inch, they take a mile. That's the first reason. Second reason, even if someone is very, 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 very advanced and on the spontaneous platform of Bhava Bhakti or Prema Bhakti, they are humble. Humble is what you want to be. They are humble, and they don't think of themselves very advanced. Like if I were to think of myself very advanced, and I'm not, of course, I would be a rascal. Actually, someone who thinks of themselves, I'm a very advanced devotee. I have so many good Vaishnava qualities. That means they ain't. It's a sign that they ain't. So there has to be humility. That's the sign of a great Vaishnava. Whew. What is it? Trinad Visunichena Toroni Vasihishuna Manina Mandadena Kirtaniya Sada Sadahari. One has to be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name in a humble way constantly. And that's very hard. Because naturally, when you try to chant, the mind is saying, you got to do so many other things, think of so many other things, you got to plan your day. You got to think of what you're going to eat. We're chanting in the morning, Hare Krishna, and we're thinking, in the morning we get a chance to eat our halwa and gulab jamans. I can't wait until this morning program is over until I get to eat. Wow. And that's the only reason I go to the morning program, so I get a chance to eat after the morning program's over. Tante Rame se Sava Atmarama Vidi Bhakta Raga Bhakta Dvivida Nama. One who always engages in the service of the Supreme Personality of God is called Atmarama. There are two types of Atmaramas. One is an Atmarama engaged in regulated devotional service. The other is an Atmarama engaged in spontaneous devotional service. So as I mentioned before, the Atmarama engaged in spontaneous devotional service also is engaged in regulated devotional service externally because he wants to set a good example, and he is humble. Remember that. It's hard to be humble. I'm so happy that I'm humble. Even if you think you're humble, you're not humble. There's a catch-22. I'm so humble. Sometimes it surprises me how humble I am. No, you're not humble, you rascal. Dvivida bhakta haya chari prakara parishada sadhana siddha sadaka gana ara. Both the Atmaramas engaged in the regulated devotional service and those engaged in spontaneous devotional service are further categorized into four groups. There are eternal associates, the associates who have become perfect by devotional service, and those who are practicing devotional service and are called sadhaka, of whom there are two varieties. Wow, two varieties of sadhakas. That's us, practicing devotional service. Jata Gyata Rati Vede Sadaka Dvi Veda Vidiraga Margi Chari Ashta Veda. Those who are practicing devotional service are either mature or immature. Therefore, the sadhakas are of two types. Since the devotees, that is mature or immature. Since the devotees execute either regulated devotional service or spontaneous devotional service, and there are four groups within these two divisions. Altogether, there are 8 varieties. So, in other words, sadhaka means practice. So, 2 types of practice. One type of practice is just the rules and regulations. The other type is spontaneous, in which they also follow the rules and regulations. And each of those types is divided into 4 divisions, which are described here. And so that's 8. So Lord Chaitanya is just showing the different meanings of the word Atmarama. Gets confusing. Vidi Bhakti Nityasira Parishada Dasa Saka Guru Kantagana Charivira Prakasha. By executing regulated devotional service, one is elevated to the platform of an eternally perfect associate, such as a servant, friend, superior, or beloved woman. Each of these is of 4 varieties. Then you have another. Servant, friend, superior, or beloved woman. Superior means like a parental relationship. Sadhana Siddha Dasa Saka Guru Kantagana Jata Rati Sadhaka Bhakta Charivirajana. Among those who have perfected themselves by devotional service, there are servants, friends, superiors, and beloved damsels. Similarly, there are 4 types of mature devotees. Ajata Rati Sadhaka Bhakta Echari Prakara Vidimarge Bhakte Sodasha Beda Prachara. Within the category of regulated devotional service, there are also immature devotees. There are also of 4 varieties. Thus, in regulated devotional service, there are altogether 16 varieties. In other words, regulated devotional service, you've got mature and immature, and there's 4 varieties in each one of those. There's 4. That makes 16. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Radhamarge Ache Bhakte Sodasha Vidhe Hata Dvimarge Atmaramera Patrisha Vidheyata. Phew. On the path of spontaneous devotional service, there are also 16 categories of devotees. Thus, there are 32 types of Atmaramas enjoying the Supreme Lord on these two paths. So, that's Atmarama. So many different definitions of the word Atmarama. Muni Nigranta Chapi Charis Shabderarta Yahanye Lageta Karye Samarta. When these 32 types of devotees are qualified with the word Muni, Nigranta, Cha, and Api, the meanings can be increased in different ways and very soundly elaborated on. Patrishe Chavishe Mili Ashtapancha Sa Are Kapeda Shuna Artera Pakasha. When we add the 26 types of devotees to these 32, they altogether number 58. You may now hear from me of further manifestations of meanings. Phew, it never ends. Itaratara Chadiya Samasa Kariye Atanavarat Marama Nama Laiye. In this way, as I add the word Cha to one word after another, I make a compound. Thus, the different names of Atmaramas can be taken 58 times. Woo! Atmaramas Cha, Atanavara, Sheshe Sabalopakari, Raki Ekabara. In this way, one can repeat the word Atmarama with Cha for each of the 58 meanings. By following the rule previously stated, rejecting all but the last, we retain that which represents all the meanings. Woo! Sarupanam eka shesha eka vivakta uktartanam aprayoga hiti. Of words having the same form in case termination, the last one is the only one retained. This is a quotation from the Panini Shustras 1264. Atana chakarera sabalopahaya ekatmarama shabde Atmanartakaya. When all the cha karas or additions of the word cha are taken away, 58 different meanings can still be understood by the one word Atmarama. So Atmarama has 58 different meanings, and Nigranta has so many different meanings, and it's practically unlimited. It's not only 61. Ashvata Vrikshascha Bata Vrikshascha Kapita Vrikshascha Amra Vrikshascha Vrikshaha. By the plural word Vrikshaha tree, all trees such as the banyan trees, fig trees, Kapita trees, and mango trees are indicated. Asmin Vani Vriksha Pwalanti Aiche Haya Taiche Sava Atmarama Krishna Bhakti Kareha. The Atmarama verse is like the sentence, in this forest there are many different trees bear fruit. Many different trees bear fruit. All Atmaramas render devotional service to Lord Krishna, and we will end there. Whew! Text. We went 273 to text 300. And perhaps tomorrow we'll be finishing this chapter and go on to the next or last chapter of the Madhya Lila. All right, so let's stop sharing and take questions from everybody. As we always do, you can type your questions, you can raise your hand, or if you're bold, you can unmute yourself, and hopefully I will hear you. Speakers. All right, Samsung. Okay. Okay, who has a question? This is your opportunity. Now, don't ask me about the details of all these different meanings and the sub-meanings and the permutations of meanings. This is very technical, and you have to be almost on the level of a super intellectual like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to understand this. Even Sanatana Goswami didn't come up with all those explanations. Neither did Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is an incarnation of Brahaspati, the priest of the demigods. So I'm not an incarnation of anybody except for me. So who has a question? A general philosophical question? No one? All right, then we can end. Okay, someone has a question. Shamapriya, what's your question?
It's a question about Narad Muni. I seem to recall, like in some one class, so I'm just like looking for clarity, I guess. You said that he is like his appearance is not as what we saw in the videos of him, like in an Indian body.
That's
He's like
right.
blue-eyed.
Narada Muni has blonde hair.
Wow.
He's Scandinavian. He doesn't even look like me.
Oh my gosh. Where was it? Where does it mention? How did you know?
Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam mentions it.
Oh, wow.
And Radharani has blue eyes.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not that Krishna consciousness is racist,
Mm.
that you have to, that all the incarnations and all the gopis and everything look like they came from India.
Do you think he still visits us, Narad Muni? Like after
Yes,
Prabhupada?
he still visits us, but I'm more inclined to work with Prabhupada right now.
Oh,
I'm not going to worry about it. I was I was visited by Prabhupada, so that's enough for me.
plenty.
So
Thank
yes, so we should understand this is not a racist thing that Narada Muni just he has to look like someone from South India or Bengal.
you.
Krishna consciousness is for everyone, and the spiritual world you got all the different colors. It's a real rainbow festival. Everyone is a person of color. Lord Chaitanya is golden. Radharani is golden. Gauranga, Gaurangi, uh, and Krishna is blackish. So there's everything there in the spiritual world. So I wouldn't say that Narada Muni is Indian.
Thank you, Gurudev. Today is Shivaratri, I think, according to the calendars. How
Yeah,
should we
tomorrow
celebrate?
tomorrow is Shivaratri here, and I'll be speaking about Shivaratri tomorrow during our class. And I also spoke last night. If you're interested in seeing the YouTube video, I gave a whole class about Shivaratri because that was the Sunday feast here. So yes, tomorrow we'll be speaking about Lord Shiva at Shivaratri, and next Sunday here we'll also be speaking about Lord Shiva. We're going to have like 2 weeks of celebration about Lord Shiva. Okay,
Thank
next question, Jiva Shakti. You have a question from New Zealand, the only country that won't allow me to come in.
Yeah, it's an interesting time here in New Zealand, Maharaj. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some
It's
interesting
easier
things
for me
going
to
on.
it's easier for me to go to Ukraine than it is to go to New Zealand at this point.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, hopefully they'll let you in soon. I just had a question. You were talking about humility. This is something
Yeah.
that I keep coming back to and reminding myself of. So genuine humility, does it just come with time? Does it, or what can we do to cultivate it?
It comes with perspective, seeing ourselves in relationship to the great devotees, seeing ourselves in relationship to God, seeing ourselves in relationship to the universe, seeing our own shortcomings. I mean, there's many ways we can cultivate it, and it does come with spiritual advancement. One has to rise above the modes of ignorance and passion to really have true humility. And that comes with the chanting and following the regulated principles and all that other nice stuff. But I find that doing this comparison thing, I mean, and appreciating and serving the other Vaishnavas. And I just look at all these Vaishnavas in the movement, and I think, I'm definitely not even qualified in comparison to them. What to speak of Prabhupada, what to speak of any, not even talking about Narada Muni here. So, and then just looking up at the stars in the sky at night, different things like that can help one develop some perspective. I think perspective is very important in developing humility. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a question from Krishna Priya Devi Dasi. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, Gurudev. That's my obeisance. So I just have one small question. We were speaking, first we were hearing about how it was explaining about how with McGrory the hunter, because he was in that renowned order of life, that he should never have more than one day of, and he should go begging alms. And then you were speaking about how in an institution, because we have to think of, preaching and also the long run and taking care of people that come. But then I was also wondering if you can speak about another aspect of that, where the lesson does apply to us in the sense that we should avoid like over accumulating and hoarding. Can you speak some on that?
Yeah, over accumulated and hoarding. Things that are unnecessary. Of course, in today's world, because of the fragile nature of society, I would even have to say that people should definitely prepare for the worst in it. Just be practical. I think it's a good idea, especially if you're in Europe today. If I was in Europe, I'd be stocking up on a lot of food, a lot of live grains, preserved live grains, and things like that. I mean, just to be practical. And McGraw was in a special situation in warm climate, where there were people around ready to give charity. I'm not in a warm climate, and there's people not around ready to give charity. And also, why should we waste Krishna's money just buying food every day? Gasoline or petrol, and not buying wholesale. I mean, it's just a waste of Krishna's money. But sometimes it's necessary to stockpile. One has to use their intelligence. Of course, over collecting or over endeavor would mean, let's say you're worried about the shoe supply running out, so you buy like 1,000 pairs of shoes in case you wear one shoe out, and then you have another. I think it's enough to have a few pairs of shoes, or several cars, like some people have several cars. Some people have. I mean, they collect unnecessarily. I know even here at the temple, there's one devotee who should remain nameless, who fills the attic of every building with so much stuff, in case we may need it. In case we may need some piece of furniture that's like 2,000 years old. So, yeah. So we should depend on Krishna, but use our intelligence, use our brains. Anyway, it's a good point. Actually, it's a very, very good point about application. Application has to be practical. Because if you take things out of context, it's just like, it's wild. It's just wild, So otherwise I'd be like, like the sages who only have one set of clothes, and I just have to but bathe in my set of clothes and let it dry on me. I mean, that's what they would do. They would actually go and they let the clothes dry on them. It actually worked for me one year. One year I was in Govardhan, at Govardhan, and it was summer, and for those of you who are into centigrade, it was 50 degrees out in the hot sun. And those of you who are into Fahrenheit, it's like 130 or something. And so I would just go and bathe. That's how I cleaned my clothes. I would go and bathe in kunds, and I'd come out, and 5 minutes later, my clothes were actually dry and pressed automatically. So I think it depends on the climate, depends upon the political situation, depends on the economic situation. It's something that you can't really apply across the board. It'd be kind of stupid. Okay, we're going to end now, and we're going to continue tomorrow. Probably we'll continue with Shivaratri tomorrow, because that's when it will be here, Shivaratri, Tuesday night. I will be in Orlando, Florida, visiting the temple, and that's where we're going to do our class from. And don't worry, I will not be in Orlando going to Disney World, because I have no attraction for such nonsense like that. I will be there doing my service as a member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.